Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ben Stafford. Thanks for coming. First off, thanks to Matt and the Making Midwest team. Can we get another round of applause for them? I hope you've all enjoyed it so far. There's a whole lot of more speakers to go, and a lot of them are a lot better than I am. I'm grateful to share the stage with you all. Again, my name is Ben Stafford, and my talk is entitled How to Become an Expert, or How to Become What Your Mom Thinks You Already Are. Before we begin, a little bit about myself. I'm 31 years old, born and raised right here in Columbus, Ohio. I've been married to this incredibly smart woman, Beth, right there, for 8 years. Father to this spunky little girl, Rue, for 3 years. And I've been a graphic designer for 10 of those years. Hey, wait, that's not me. That's Oscar-nominated actor Ryan Gosling. Get out of my presentation, Ryan. I enjoy watching and studying TV and film. I also love finding new music and listen to about 250 new albums every year. And also, contrary to popular belief, I do not go tanning. In fact, I walk into a dimly lit room and I begin to paste. This is a picture of me streaking in a snowstorm. And lastly, when I design or illustrate, I love to rise to the challenge of transforming complex concepts into works of simplicity. But as I stand before you today, let me assure you that I am not an expert. In Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, he concluded that if somebody deliberately practiced something for 10,000 hours, they would become an expert at doing that thing. That roughly translates to about 5 years. So right there, you're looking at an expert kid. I showed up, I worked hard, and by age 6, I could do expert kid things really well, like snack time, naps, and coloring. I've since grown up and become even more of an expert in all 3 of those areas, but it wasn't until my senior year of high school that I decided I wanted to pursue coloring full-time. I am currently a full-time illustrator and designer with my wife Beth at our home studio, Fox Meadow Creative. Almost 10 years ago, I started working at Attaché, where I was a designer and an art director. I was learning new things and gradually getting better at my craft. But as you can see here, it's a slight slope. I was there for 6 years, but it wasn't until 3 years ago when I began working with Beth full-time that I started forcing myself to practice daily and found new avenues to get better. And as you can see here from this chart, my progress went through the roof, and others began to pay attention. In fact, on July 10th, 2015, I received an email from Google recruiting me to come illustrate for them full-time. Needless to say, I was honored and surprised, but at that point, I didn't need Google reaching out to feel validated or to feel that I had arrived. It was just simply a waypoint letting me know I was headed in the right direction. This is a segue. Moving on. I love Great Britain exports, British humor, C.S. Lewis, James Bond, Doctor Who, crumpets, I actually don't know what they are, but it sure is a fun word to say, and last but not least, the British invasion. In Gladwell's book, he mentions a story about how the Beatles and how they had the opportunity to play 1,200 shows in Hamburg, Germany between the years 1960 and 1964. But this was before coming to America that started the British invasion. Can you believe that? Most performers don't even play that many shows in their entire life. But the Beatles did it in 4 years. This was the precursor to their greatness. This was their 10,000 hours. First, we must ask ourselves, why is practice important? And I think the answer is this. Practice pushes us outside of our comfort zone into a higher level that is unachievable if you're just showing up. Now, I believe it's more than just showing up to work. I'd like to submit that those hours aren't necessarily the same thing. I've put in my 10,000 hours at work, but that has not made me an expert. It's about the amount of practice you've put in that makes playing the game a success. Now, I doubt anybody here is actually clocking their deliberate practice time, and I'm not saying one should, but how much time are you dedicating to any amount of practice? Is it built into your workday, or is it off the clock at home? Or is it in Mr. Miyagi's backyard? If the saying is true that practice makes perfect, then most certainly practice can make expert. It wasn't until 3 years ago that I decided to pursue illustration. Something clicked inside my brain, and I found that I really enjoyed doing that more than anything else. Thinking I was incredibly behind, I began to practice and challenge myself, and I think it's paid off. So let's take that large, daunting number of 10,000 hours and divide it into 10 different ways I've put into practice in my own journey to becoming an expert. Number 1, practice by sketching. This one may seem like the most obvious, and I know it was brought up earlier during another talk. But if you're not carrying around a sketchbook, consider this is the best piece of advice I can give you this afternoon. Step away from the computer and focus on the analog. We need to realize that our sketchbooks are not just for art, but for ideas. Sometimes when I have creative block, I'll sketch, and a lot of times it helps unblock that mess. I'll later turn some fun ideas into final art if I have the time. Also, I encourage you to work in pen and not pencil, because it allows you to make mistakes and create iterations. Nobody's counting how many times you draw something over and over again either. I practice by sketching fake editorial spots for different articles I read, a lot in Wired magazine. You don't even have to create a final version of these non-assignments, but it does help get the ideas out and quickly, and it's certainly good practice for the real deal. This article here was a quick one about how wind turbines were modeled after owls' wings. Cool. This one was for females being on the $10 bill, or a female. Wireless battery charging, death by prescription pills, and sharing secrets or gossip at the water cooler. Number 2, practice by exploring. Have you ever thought, I wonder how they made that fill in the blank? Well, I do all the time. So instead of just thinking it, I practice by venturing into new territories. One evening, an image of a snake on some leaves popped into my head. I thought, man, I don't know how I would illustrate that, especially geometrically or in my style. So I sketched it again, and I even pulled out a shoelace out of my shoe to see if I could figure it out in a tangible way first. Eventually, I got it up on screen and played around with it and ended up creating something I didn't know I could create. Exploration is key to problem solving and keeping your minds fresh. Number 3, practice by vomiting. Now, I couldn't think of a better word to describe this type of practice, but I think it captures it pretty well. In a similar fashion to exploring, it's about practicing by creating work that is not focused on publishing, but creating just to create. It's having a folder entitled Vomit or Nonsense and filling it up with trials and errors, half-finished pieces. See what works and what doesn't, and free yourself of the concern that somebody's going to judge you for it. Naming the process vomiting is less about the content, or less about the quality of work, and more about just getting the work out of your head and onto your computer or sketchbook. Number 4, practice by participating. Being asked to contribute to something that's not about you is humbling and super fun to participate in. It's like getting assigned a school project with clear objectives everyone has to adhere to. Practicing with constraints and goals is always good training for client work. Whether you believe in a cause or idea or simply just for fun, it allows you to be part of something bigger than yourself. If you see a fun project forming, don't be afraid to ask to contribute either. This was for Brad Woodard's Artists for Education project, and it was focused on creating quality educational posters for teachers to use in the classroom. I had this incredible opportunity to impact education and burn images into young and impressionable minds. I chose plant versus animal cell anatomy because in school, science wasn't my jam. But I'm hoping a student like myself sees this and it inspires them. Jonathan Lawrence's state plate project focused on recreating 50 state plates with the idea that these new designs would be thoughtful representations while still being beautiful, functional pieces of art. I got to design Nevada. I tried to do something a bit differently by embossing the negative space instead of the numerals, and I think it turned out well and was unique among the other 49. This project doesn't launch until August 30th, so stay tuned, but I'm thrilled to be included in the new Type Hike series, Alpha Beast. This was very challenging, but once again, I'm humbled to be included. Now, I can't show you my final piece just yet, but come see me afterwards if you want to see. Number 5, adding new tools. I've taken my fair share of Skillshare classes and watched tutorials on YouTube, but I started tuning into Twitch streams. Has anybody done Twitch? Okay, there's a lot of streams on there that you as artists or designers or illustrators need to check out. It's not just for video games. But I started tuning into Twitch a few months ago to see other designers and illustrators work. And it may not have been the same thing that I was working on at that moment, but I was able to learn cool tips and tricks I wouldn't have known otherwise. So one stream I watched was Alex Grenling doing pixel fan art for the video game Journey, which is a great game. It was educational, and little did I know that a few months later, I was going to be contacted by a client to create pixel art illustrations without ever having done them before. But now I knew how to. These are some of the icons and a hero image I was hired to illustrate for a client. By learning new skills, you will reap benefits, but you may not know it at that time. It's just good to know there's always room for new tools in your tool belt. Number 6, practice by saying no. A few years ago, I made this graphic for the To Resolve project where designers would create pieces based on New Year's resolutions. Sometimes as designers, we say yes to a lot. Sometimes to things we probably shouldn't do, or even things that we don't want to do. But saying no to things has helped me keep focused on what I really want to do. It's not always easy, and it may upset people, but it will be worth it in the long run. But you don't have to take my word for it. Number 7, practice by refining. A few years ago, I had a fun time creating a Blue Jay illustration for a friend. At the time, I loved it, and thankfully she did too. It wasn't until this past year that I looked at it again and thought, man, I wish I would have done things a tad bit differently. So for the sake of refinement and making old work better, I gave it a shot. I ended up starting from scratch and creating something very similar, but in my opinion, way better. Better negative space, better shapes, better forms. And I feel like taking a look at pieces from years past and seeing what you can do to improve will not only show you that you've grown, but it'll give you a good perspective on where you'll be in another couple of years if you continue to practice. Number 8, practice by teaching. I've always said that if I wasn't going to be an illustrator or a designer, that I'd be a teacher. If it wasn't for the schooling I'd have to get or the debt I'd have to take on, I'd likely pursue it. But the thought occurred to me, why can't you make your own classes and have people take your course online, live? And so I did. This has taught me so much about crafting a valuable class, mastering the technique well enough to teach it, and communicating well with others. It's been very rewarding to work hard and gain practice by taking time to teach what I know. Empowering others is also incredibly rewarding. Just knowing I'm helping these students gain their 10,000 hours has been a very meta experience. Number 9, investing in a community. I remember texting individual friends for feedback on pieces, and it wasn't efficient, but I was always appreciative. I needed it, and I created it to make my work better. And it wasn't until March of last year that I talked with another like-minded friend, Jeremy Booth, about creating a Slack group that was dedicated to feedback and friendship. And that's when our group 2 Cents was created. We define ourselves as an intentional 10 to 12 person community focused on the betterment of oneself and one another. In other words, we invest in each other with the sole purpose of making our work better and becoming closer friends. It's a simple mission, but I think it's one worth pursuing. We hang out and work and chat every single day, and I've gone on 2 retreats. It's our intention to keep this small, as we've seen other Slack groups fail to have the secret sauce, which is a small, tight-knit community. But we do hope to encourage others to start their own 2 Cents groups here in the near future. We don't want this to be an exclusive thing that we only get to experience. But we want others to reap the rewards that we've seen. Being a part of this group has improved my work and my life dramatically. And last but not least, number 10, playing. This is about creating things out of pure joy. You know, Jeremy talked about joy earlier, and I think that's a big part of why I do what I do. But nobody said that practice couldn't be fun. You need to have a passion for the things that you love. I love creating things for fun based on the things I'm experiencing in my life, like when I finished the first season of Fargo and I had Bemidji on the brain. Or when my daughter was watching Totoro every day for a month. Or when Super Team Deluxe wanted to pay tribute to all things sci-fi, so I made an enamel pin out of my favorite movie robot. Or when I wanted to commemorate Memorial Day. Or when our family wanted to announce our second adoption journey. Or when I was reflecting on Jesus' death and resurrection. But last year, I had created this Lost poster for fun to commemorate a concert that I was going to in LA. It had connected some of my loves. I love Lost, music, illustration, and design. And Michael Giacchino was the composer of the show score, and so he was going to be there. And you may know him from soundtracks like Up, Incredibles, Utopia, Rogue One, and most recently the new Spider-Man Homecoming movie, and The War for Planet of the Apes. I had sent it to Michael Giacchino in an email, and I tagged him on Twitter, hoping that he might just give it a little like. But he didn't acknowledge it, nothing happened, which is kind of what I expected. Not wanting to give up, I contacted the venue that it was going to be played at in hopes that they would want to partner with me to create the poster. Once again, no luck. They said that they were not in charge, they were just hosting. However, they did reach out to Musicians at Play, the nonprofit organization that was putting this whole thing together. The president of Musicians at Play loved it, but said that they were a nonprofit and they financially couldn't support something like this. But I had told the president that I believed in miracles and thought we could find a printer that could help us with this mission. She was all for it, but it fell on me to find that printer. No joke, the first printer I contacted offered to print 1,000 posters at no cost. This is something I didn't even ask for. So I immediately replied to the president to let her know of the updated situation. She said yes. She asked me what cut I wanted from the posters, as the proceeds would go towards the foundation. All I wanted were the autographs of the hosts of the evening, the executive producer Carlton Hughes and Michael Giacchino. And she replied, "Oh Ben, I'll get you backstage and they can sign your poster right in front of you." Beth and I went to the concert. It was incredible and everything I had hoped it would be. Michael Giacchino and Carlton Hughes were very genuine and thoughtful. Everybody took care of us that night. Look at that, best poster ever? Really? After seeing that, I felt like I could retire. It was also extremely cool to see people lined up to buy my poster. It was a first for me and an experience I'll never forget. What you're looking at here is one of the most thoughtful, awkward, unexpected, beautiful hugs I've ever received. You never know where fun projects might lead you, especially if you're persistent and willing to push through a few no's and maybes. So with all 10 of these intentional practices, I've seen my work get better tenfold over the past 3 years, much like the Beatles did in Hamburg, Germany. I'm still in my Hamburg years, and I may be for a while, but I'm okay with that. But don't be surprised if a Ben Stafford invasion occurs, because I am not an expert yet. Thank you.